Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum and Namaste. This is your literature mentor. In this video, I'm going to discuss the literature and works of Anglo-Norman Age in detail. But before going to discuss it, I will give a little overview of the previous video about the Anglo-Norman Age. The Anglo-Norman Age began after the Norman conquered England. William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, defeated Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings. This victory ended the Anglo-Saxon rule and started a new period in English history. After becoming king, William the Conqueror introduced the Roman system of government and feudalism in England. The Norman rulers controlled land and power, and French culture strongly influenced English society. The normal French language became the language of the royal court, law, and the upper class, while the common people continued to speak Old English. During this period, England experienced major political and cultural changes. Many castles and churches were built, and the Normans strengthened their control over the country. In 1086, the famous Domestic Book was created to record land ownership and resources in England. The Anglo-Norman period was also influenced literature. Writers began producing works in Latin, French, and English, including chronicles, religious writings, romances, and heroic stories. Stories about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table became most popular in this time. By the end, the languages and culture of the Normans and Anglo-Saxons gradually mixed, which later helped the development of Middle English and literature. Okay, now I will discuss the major genres of Anglo-Norman literature. Religious literature. They wrote about religious literature, historical chronicle, in which they discusses the events of history and the main figures in history, romances, in which they studied the heroic deeds and stories, etc., and courtly love, and also the other is didactic and didactic and fables. Didactic and fables means that they use जानवरों की example use करते थे moral lessons देने के लिए, और fable short stories teacher moral teaching करते थे. Trilingual culture and linguistic situation. After the Norman Conquest, 3 languages were used in England. Latin, that was the language of the church and scholars used for theology, education, and official records. Anglo-Norman French, language of the court, aristocracy, law, administration. It was used for literary works among the ruling class. English was the language of the common people. Gradually, it evolved from Old English into Middle English. This trilingual system produced a transition state between Old English literature and Middle English literature. So what did they speak 3 languages? One was Latin, other was Anglo-French, and the other was English. And it means that their literature was also in 3 languages. That is Latin, French, and English. English was the language of the Anglo-Saxon. They brought French with themselves, and Latin was the language of the church and the scholars. So basically, they speak 3 languages. Now I will discuss the literature of literature. Major forms of Anglo-Norman literature. Number 1 is historical chronicles. Historical chronicles are written records that describe historical events in the order they happened. Medieval writers recorded important events such as war, kings, actions, political change, and religious matters year by year. So, after the Roman conquest, Jews wanted to record and legitimize their rule. Therefore, historical chronicles becomes very popular. Number 1 is the Historia Regum Britannia. It was written by Geoffrey of Monmouth around 1136. It contains the ancient history of Britain, as I have discussed, that it contains the history of kings, etc. Describe Britain from the mythical fountain Brutus to later king. Popularized the legends of King Arthur. Brutus was a mythical figure. So it was from the Brutus to the later kings who ruled England. Now what is the importance of this? It is important because it makes myth with history, as I have told you. Brutus जो था वो एक mythical figure था और उसे उस हिस्ट्री के बुक में शामिल कर दिया था, हिस्टोरिया रेगम ब्रिटानिया. So it means that they mix history with mythical figure. Also, they influence other romances and many other books and literature of that age. Moreover, this spread authorial nature across Europe. Okay, so now we have another one. That is Roman de Brut. Roman de Brut is an important literary work of the Anglo-Norman period. It is written about 1155 by West. This work is a French verse translation and adaptation of Historia Regum Britannia. It was written earlier by Geoffrey of Monmouth. West wrote the history of Britain in the Anglo-Norman French language so that it could be understood by the Norman nobility. Got it? Okay, now meaning of Brut. The word Brut comes from Brutus of Troy, who according to legend founded Britain after the fall of Troy. The poem tells the story of kings of Britain starting from Brutus. Basically, it is an adaptation of Geoffrey's work, as I have discussed, and it also introduced the idea of the round table. The idea of the round table means that the knights are equal. Okay, now importance. The round table symbolized equality among knights, and the work made the Arthurian legends popular among the Norman nobility. That is, the Norman kings and the Norman nobility know about the Arthurian legend because of this work. Brut is written by Lehman around 1200, and it is an adaptation of West's poems. It is about 30,000 lines long, and it uses allocation from Old English poetry. It is an important historical and literary work. It was written during the late Anglo-Norman period. It is based on Roman de Brut, as I have discovered that it is the adaptation of West's poem, which was written earlier by West. Okay, West's work itself was based on Historia Regum Britannia of Geoffrey of Monmouth. So it means that West's poem was adaptation of Historia Regum Britannia, and the Lehman work Brut is also the adaptation of the West poem, which is the adaptation actually itself by adaptation of Regum Britannia. This poem actually tells the story of legendary history of Britain, starting with Brutus of Troy, who is believed to be the founder of Britain. Okay, now importance. It shows the revival of English as a literary language. It combines Anglo-Saxon tradition with French Norman style. It also reflects growing national identity. So the other is religious literature. Religious literature was one of the most important types of writing during the Anglo-Norman Age, basically from 1066 to 1200. Most of this literature was written by monks and church scholars, and its main purpose was to teach Christian belief, moral values, and religious duties. The main purpose of this was to spread Christianity, to teach moral lessons, and to guide people about religion, life, and good behavior. And it was written in language because it was the language of the church scholars and clergy. It was also written in Anglo-Norman French from Norman nobility, and it was also written in early English to teach common people. So the first word is linguistic. Linguistic means guide for and process. It is one of the most famous religious guides written during the late Anglo-Norman Age for female anarchists. Anarchists means nuns living in seclusion. वो nuns जो secular थे, जो religion को strictly follow नहीं करते थे. Background जो उसका तर्क कब लिखा गया था, किस तरह लिखा गया था. It was written around 13th century in Middle English, and the title means guide for anarchists, यानी female hermits, or which means guide. The purpose was to provide spiritual guidance, as I have discussed earlier, rules for daily life and moral instruction, what they should do and what they should not do. Importance. It was written in simple English prose, and important early example of English. It is an important early example of English prose writing. It also shows medieval concern for a person's spiritual life. Basically, this incline was written for what? They were written for the nuns of their time that were living a secular life. It was a guide, a moral guide, a spiritual guide for them, how to live their life according to the Christianity. The other is Ormulum. Ormulum is an important religious work from the Anglo-Norman Age. It was written by a monk named Orm around the 12th century. It was written in Middle English for ordinary people to understand the Bible and Christian teachings. Unlike Latin or French texts, it was accessible to the English-speaking laity. The work consists mainly of homilies. Homilies means explanation of scripture passages. Its purpose was to explain the Gospels clearly and simply to the common people of England. Each passage includes a scripture quotation, a paraphrase of explanation, and plain Middle English. Orm used his own spelling system to make pronunciation consistent, which helps modern scholars understand Middle English pronunciation. It was written in rhyme couplets. It uses alliteration, influenced by earlier Anglo-Saxon poetry. It was clear, repetitive, and a structured style, making it easy for people to learn and memorize. So what is important? It is important because it studies the Middle English phonetics. It shows the strong influence of the church on literature. Basically, Ormulum जो है वो अपनी टेक्निक इस्तेमाल करता था, अपनी लिंग्विस्टिक सिस्टम जो था, और ये जो था उसकी वजह से बात को भी फ़ायदा हुआ. वो उस एक लिंग्विस्टिक सिस्टम के यूज़ करते थे और अपने वर्ड जो है उसकी इंटीग्रेशन करते थे. और दूसरी बात ये जो है ये Ormulum जो है इट इज़ ए गुड एग्जाम्पल ऑफ हाउ चर्च इन्फ्लुएंस द लिटरेचर. और ये कॉमन लोगों के लिए था, जो कॉमन जो फ्रेंच नहीं बोलना चाहते थे, जो लैटिन नहीं बोलना चाहते थे. Other is romance literature and chivalry. So first of all, I will define what is romance. Romances जो है वो it was one of the most popular forms of literature during this period. So now what is romance? A romance is a narrative poem focuses on knives, heroic adventures, court love, supernatural events, and moral testing. ओके रोमांसेस जो थे वो एक नैरेटिव पोएम था जो जिसका फोकस था नाइट्स पर, हीरोइक एडवेंचर्स पर, यानी हीरो जो काम करते थे, जो बढ़िया बढ़िया काम करते थे, कोर्टरी लॉ जो था, इसके अलावा सुपरनेचुरल इवेंट्स जो थे और मॉरल टीचिंग्स और टेस्टिंग वगैरह, इस सब ये सारे थीम्स जो है ये सारे रोमांसेस में थे. और ये थीम जो है इट वाज इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय फ्रेंच लिटरेरी ट्रेडिशंस, नॉट टाइप्स ऑफ रोमांसेस. Basically, romances are of three types: matter of Britain, which we also call Victorian romances, matter of French, and matter of Rome. So first of all, I will discuss matter of Britain. This type of romance is based on the legends of King Arthur, the stories about King Arthur, and the Knights of the Round Table. The key figures include King Arthur, Sir Gawain, and Launcelot. Characteristic: chivalry and knightly honor, magical elements and supernatural adventures, and taste of courage and morality. Also, they also define courtly love. Example is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Arthurian legends, popularized by Geoffrey of Monmouth, and adaptations like Rome the Brute by Grace. So these are the matter of Britain. And this is also called Arthurian romances because this is about the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Okay, now I have also discussed this theme that the themes are chivalry, magical adventures, and courtly love. And the examples are Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, knights like Launcelot and Sir Gawain. Basically, romances जो थे वो थ्री टाइप्स के थे, जैसे कि मैंने पहले भी रिपीट किया और अब फिर से मैं रिपीट करूँगी. अब मैटर ऑफ ब्रिटेन जो थे उसको इसलिए डिवाइड किया था क्योंकि ये किंग आर्थर और उसके जितने भी नाइट्स थे उसके बारे में थे. यानी जिसका जो थीम थे, जो कॉन्टेंट था, ये सब कुछ जो था ये किंग आर्थर और उसके नाइट्स के इर्द गिर्द घूमता था. Okay, the next type of romance is matter of France. It's also called Carolingian romances. This romances focuses on the heroic deeds of Charlemagne and his knights. Central figure is Charlemagne. And characteristics: military heroism and warfare, Christian struggle against enemies, loyalty to the king, feudal values. Famous example is the Song of the Runner. These romances are about the heroes of Charlemagne and his knights, as I have discussed it earlier. And this focuses on war, loyalty, and Christian heroism. Many stories describe battle against enemies of the Christian kingdom. Example, if we take the example is the Song of the Ronald. This tells the story of Ronald, a brave knight of Charlemagne. So ये मैटर ऑफ फ्रांस जो थे ये सारे के सारे सेंटर फिगर जो था चार्लीमेन का, जिस तरह ब्रिटेन में सेंटर फिगर किंग आर्थर था। तो मेरे साहब ने तो ये दोनों सीख लिए होंगे, मैटर ऑफ ब्रिटेन एंड मैटर ऑफ फ्रांस और इनमें फ़र्क। वो किंग आर्थर के बारे में था, मैटर ऑफ ब्रिटेन और उसके नाइट्स के बारे में, और ये जो है ये चार्लीमेन के बारे में है। और ये जितने भी उसके हीरोइज़म और वारफेयर एक्सेट्रा ये सारे जो है ये सारे चार्लीमेन के ये किंग के हैं। और उसके एग्जाम्पल जो है द सॉन्ग ऑफ रोनल, एंड दूसरा जो है इसमें जो है सॉन्ग ऑफ रोनल जो है इसमें डिस्कस होता है क्या रोनल के बारे में, जो कि एक बहुत भी ब्रेव नाइट होता है। ओके, नाउ वी विल मूव टू अनदर वन, द मैटर ऑफ रोम। सो द मैटर ऑफ रोम इज अबाउट classical Greek and Roman history and mythology. They retell ancient stories in a medieval romantic style. Its subjects include Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and yes, characteristic. Classical history mixed with medieval ideas, यानी classical history जो है उसको medieval ideas के साथ mix किया गया है इसमें। Heroic journeys and conquests, यानी उनकी जो उन्होंने हीरो जैसे किरदार किए हैं, एक्शंस किए हैं और उन्होंने जो फतुहात की है इसके बारे में है। Moral and philosophical theme जो है, these romances show how medieval writers adapted ancient stories to their own culture. ये मैटर ऑफ रोम हमें ये शो करती है कि medieval writers किस तरह रोमन के या जो बाकी एंशियंट स्टोरीज जो है बाकी पहले बहुत पहले गुजर चुकी है वो अपने कल्चर में ला रहे थे, उसको फॉलो कर रहे थे, अडॉप्ट कर रहे थे। सो एग्जाम्पल इज रोमन द ट्रॉय, it was about the Trojan War. The Roman de Alexander, it was about the life of Alexander the Great. So these are the types of romances, matter of Britain, matter of France and matter of Rome. अपन सबको पता चल गया होगा कि बेसिकली इनको कंटेंट की वजह से और थीम्स की वजह से डिवाइड किया गया है। जैसे मैंने पहले डिस्कस किया था, मैटर ऑफ ब्रिटेन जो था वो किंग आर्थर के इर्द गिर्द घूमती थी कहानियाँ और नाइट्स सेप्टोस के बारे में। फ्रांस, मैटर ऑफ फ्रांस जो था वो चार्लीमेन और उसके नाइट्स के बारे में, और मैटर ऑफ रोम जो है वो बाकी पास के जो हीरोज और रोमन उसके ग्रीक एंड रोमन हिस्ट्री और माइथोलॉजी और उसके हीरो जो है उसके इर्द गिर्द घूमते थे। So we will take a general example of the romance, that is Sir Gawain and the Green Knights. This story revolves around the knight Sir Gawain. It was a plot. A mysterious Green Knight challenges King Arthur's court. Gawain accepts the challenge and must later face a dangerous test of courage and honesty. Theme जो है उसमें honor and loyalty थी, temptation थी, Christian morality and human imperfection. और style जो था, it was written in literative words, rich symbolism and imagery. Or importance जो था, this romance successfully combines pagan legend with Christian values, making it one of the most finest and most important medieval poems.
एक मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग इसके बारे में जो है, इसका पोएट जो है वो अननोन है। कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि पर्ल है ना, लेकिन इसका पोएम जो है उसका एग्जैक्ट पता नहीं है।
Okay, I will just give a little summary of it. Plot summary जो है वो कुछ इस तरह है कि during a Christmas feast at Camelot, a mysterious Green Knight enters the court. He challenges the knights. Anyone may strike him with an axe, but the challenger must receive a blow in return in one ear. Sir Gawain accepts the challenge and defeats the Green Knight. To everyone's shock, the Green Knight picks up his head and reminds Gawain of the agreement. Gawain embarks on a journey to fulfill his promise, facing tests of honesty, courage, and faith. He stays as a lord caster. While he is tested, the lord wife tries to tempt him, and he must resist it. Gawain eventually meets the Green Knight, who reveals that the test was to judge Gawain's virtue. Gawain returns to Camelot humble, but honored for his courage and honesty. So the fourth one is allegorical and social poetry. As society changed, literature began to criticize corruption and injustice. During the Anglo-Norman Age, poetry was not only about heroes and romance. It was included allegorical and social themes. These poems sought to teach lessons, reflect on society, and criticize human behavior. Allegory is when people, objects, or events represent ideas, morals, or spiritual truths. So this is allegorical poetry. Features that they use symbolism to convey religious or moral lessons. Characters often represent virtues, vices, or abstract ideas, and they commonly used to teach moral behavior or spiritual truths. और form जो था वो ड्रीम विजन एलोगोरिकल पोएम, यानी इस तरह था कि वो ड्रीम देखते थे, और इट वॉज अ ड्रीम विजन एलोगोरिकल पोएम. A story जो है वो the narrative dreams about the problems of society and the character peers a humble plowman represent honesty and Christian truth. So कुछ इस तरह इसकी राइटिंग स्टाइल होती थी कि जो नरेटर है वो ड्रीम देखता था और उसमें प्रॉब्लम ऑफ सोसाइटी फिर उसके हल और उसको क्रिटिसाइज किया जाता था, उसके लिए हल ढूंढा जाता था. अच्छा थीम्स क्या आते हैं? करप्शन इन द चर्च, सोशल इनजस्टिस एंड मॉरल रिफॉर्म. Importance क्या था? One of the greatest works in the Middle English literature, and it was a realistic portrayal of medieval society. Okay, so this is the courtly, allegorical poetry. Now we have another courtly and narrative poetry. During the Anglo-Norman Age, poetry was an important part of literature, and it mainly took two forms: courtly poetry and narrative poetry. Courtly poetry focuses on love, chivalry, and the ideas of the noble class. And narrative poetry tells a story, often in verse, and can include heroes, adventure, history, or legend. Now, structure. Frame narrative in which pilgrims traveling to the Canterbury. They have given the example of the Canterbury Tales, written by Geoffrey Chaucer. उसका स्ट्रक्चर कुछ ऐसा था कि पिलग्रिम जो है वो कैंटरबरी को जाते हैं पिलग्रिम के लिए, और जब पिलग्रिमेज के लिए वो लोग जाते हैं तो रास्ते में वो अपनी अपनी स्टोरीज बयान करते हैं, क्योंकि रास्ता जो है वो तवील होता है और वो बोर हो रहे होते हैं, तो सिर्फ फॉर पासिंग ऑफ टाइम दे टेल देयर स्टोरीज, और उसको चौसर ने एक्सप्लेन किया है और पोइट्री की शक्ल दी है. मेजर कैरेक्टर्स नायक है, मर्चेंट, वाइफ ऑफ पाथ, पर्डोनर, मीनर. तो ये जो है ये मेन कैरेक्टर्स है. ईच कैरेक्टर रिप्रेजेंट अ डिफरेंट सोशल क्लास ऑफ मेडिवल सोसाइटी. Now themes: human nature, love and humor, social satire, and religious hypocrisy. So ये है. So main characteristics of Anglo-Norman literature. Trilingual culture. I have discussed it in my previous video, but I will just give a little of it to remind you. They speak Latin, French, and English. Federal influence. Literature reflects federal loyalty and hierarchy. Chivalric ideas. Themes of bravery, honor, and service to ladies. Religious dominance. Most are emphasize morality and salvation. Allegory. Abstract ideas represented through symbolic characters. Revival of English. Gradual return of English as a main literary language. So these are some of the characteristics of Anglo-Norman literature. क्या थे? ट्राइलिंगुअल कैसे था? वहाँ पे 3 लैंग्वेजेस बोली जाती थी, लेटिन, फ्रेंच और इंग्लिश. फ्यूडल इन्फ्लुएंस था, जैसे कि मैंने कहा कि फ्रेंच में जो था वो फ्यूडलिज्म था, और वो एंग्लो-नॉर्मन जो है, ये नॉर्मन जो थे वो अपने पास रखे गए हैं. ओके, एक मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट बात, ये एंग्लो-नॉर्मन उसको क्यों कहा जाता है? पहले उसको नॉर्मन्स कहते थे, लेकिन एंग्लो-नॉर्मन्स तब कहा जाता है जब वो एंग्लो सेक्सन या इंग्लैंड को फतह करते हैं और वो एंग्लो सेक्सन के साथ मर्ज हो जाते हैं. तो एंग्लो सेक्सन और नॉर्मन से ये लोग एंग्लो-नॉर्मन बन जाते हैं, which shows that they combine and merge into one another. ओके, तीन जो है वो शिवरिक आइडियस है. शिवरिक आइडियस यानी शिवरी वार को कहते हैं. सो जो है थीम ऑफ ब्रेवरी होगा, ऑनर और सर्विस टू लेडीज, ये सारे थीम उसमें थे. रिलीजियस डोमिनेंस थी, जिस तरह मैंने कहा कि क्रिश्चियनिटी जो वो मेन रिलीजन था एंग्लो-नॉर्मन एज में. रिलीजन मैंने सोचा कि सारे जो है वो आई ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन इट. Okay, importance of the Anglo-Norman Age. The Anglo-Norman period is important because it enriched English vocabulary with French words. It introduced the Roman tradition. It strengthened prose and narrative writing. Phrase जो है ना ये यहाँ से शुरू हुआ था. And it preserved historical and legendary traditions. It prepared the way for writers like Geoffrey Chaucer. It created a bridge between Old English literature and Renaissance literature. So basically जो मैंने अभी जोफ्री चौसर का जिक्र किया है, आप लोग सोच रहे होंगे ना चौसर एज से बिलोंग करते हैं. So बेसिकली चौसर एज उसको इसलिए कहती क्योंकि उसमें चौसर पैदा हुआ था और चौसर ने लिखाई की थे। बाकी जो है बाकी ही इज आल्सो somehow a part of Anglo-Norman Age। So इम्पोर्टेंस क्या थी? एक सबसे ज़्यादा मेरे ख्याल में जो इम्पोर्टेंट है वो ये है कि फ्रेंच दे इंट्रोड्यूस फ्रेंच वर्ड्स इनटू इंग्लिश और इंग्लिश को काफ़ी जो है वो आसान बनाया। और दूसरी बात जो है उन्होंने इसकी वजह से नरेटिव राइटिंग भी मजबूत हुई और प्रोज भी, क्योंकि राइटर्स जो थे अथर्स जो थे वो प्रोज और नरेटिव राइटिंग करते थे। इसके अलावा उसने हिस्ट्री को प्रिजर्व किया, उसने हिस्ट्री के बारे में लिखा। और दूसरी बात जो है उसने इन सब ने जो पोइट्री जो थे वो जो है काफ़ी हद तक डेवलप हो गए। सो दिस इज